Chapter 6, Bring Flowers. A few days had passed since the night Jack dropped Donnie and Ralph off at the meeting in Manhattan, the one they never returned from. The eerie silence that followed was enough to make everyone uneasy. Nobody in Bensonhurst had heard anything, and the grim reality was starting to set in. Donnie and Ralph were likely gone for good. He couldn't shake the feeling of guilt gnawing at him. He kept replaying that night over and over in his mind. He had been the one who dropped them off, right to their likely deaths. Every time he thought about it, his stomach knotted. He knew it wasn't his fault, but that didn't stop the unease from creeping in. Vinny, who had been doing his best to hold things together, pulled Jack aside one night in the back of Rocco's, his bar in Bensonhurst. Vinny was visibly rattled but kept his tone even, trying to calm his cousin. "I get it, Johnny. You feel responsible," he opened sympathetically, lighting a cigarette and taking a long drag. "But you did what you were told. It's not on you. We don't know what happened yet, but we got people looking into it. Few guys asking around in Manhattan, trying to get answers. Until we know for sure, don't go blaming yourself." Jack nodded, though the worry still weighed heavy on him. "You really think they ain't coming back?" Vinny exhaled a cloud of smoke, his jaw tight. "Look, kid, when someone like Donnie goes missing this long, it usually doesn't mean great things. But until we hear something solid, we gotta keep our heads straight. I need you focused. All I use." Jack straightened up, knowing that when Vinny spoke like this, it was time to push emotions aside and get to work. "What do you need us to do?" Vinny gave a small nod, pleased with Jack's readiness. "Me and a few of the guys have taken over Donnie's work, at least temporarily. We gotta keep things running smoothly. I got a job for you three. You're gonna drive his uncle up to a meeting in Long Island. You know Matty Flowers, right?" Jack, intrigued, waited for more. "Matty's big in the construction business, and he and Donnie are partnered on this housing bid," he continued. "It's for work in an up-and-coming project in Gowanus. Big business, new housing developments and some commercial spots. If we land this deal, we're talking millions of dollars for the family. Easy." Jack's eyes narrowed. "So, what do you need us to do?" "You're gonna escort him to the meeting. He's the one negotiating, but you three are there to make sure things don't get messy with the union people." Jack nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and responsibility. Frankie and Tony, who had been sitting nearby listening intently, were equally eager. Vinny handed Jack a slip of paper with an address. "Matty lives in Gravesend. Here's the address. I called ahead, so he'll be expecting yous. Head over there right now." The three friends left Rocco's and climbed into the car, the weight of their new assignment sinking in as they pulled away from the Bensonhurst streets. The drive to Gravesend wasn't long, but it gave them time to talk. "This is big," Tony said from the back seat, grinning from ear to ear. "We're moving up. Doing important things." Frankie, sitting next to him, nodded in agreement. "And it's all thanks to you. If it wasn't for your connection to Vinny, we wouldn't be getting these kinds of opportunities so fast." Jack didn't respond right away, his eyes focused on the road ahead. He knew Frankie was right, but he wasn't about to let the weight of family ties get to his head. Still, he felt the surge of pride that came with being trusted to handle important jobs. "Yeah, maybe," he finally said, "but we gotta prove ourselves. Every time." The car fell quiet for a moment as the three friends considered their futures. This life was dangerous, but the rewards were undeniable. The respect, the money, the power, it was all there for the taking. Eventually, they arrived at the correct apartment. Matty Flowers was already waiting for them on the porch, smoking a cigar. He was older, thick-set, with a full head of gray hair and a swagger that came with years of experience. The moment Jack pulled up, Matty grinned and walked over to the car. "You boys ready for this?" he asked, leaning into the passenger window. Jack smiled. "Yeah, we're ready." He chuckled as he climbed into the passenger seat, his large frame settling in comfortably. "Good. This is a big one. We land this bid, we're talking millions. You boys stick with me, you'll be rolling in it." Jack drove off as Matty lit his cigar some more, filling the car with the scent of smoke. He had an easy way about him, cracking jokes and talking with a thick Brooklyn accent that made Frankie and Tony laugh. The tension of the situation seemed to melt away in his presence. "You know what's funny?" Matty said with a grin. "Everyone's always talking about drug money or gambling. But construction? That's where the real dough is. You land a couple union bids, and you're set for life. And that's what this deal's about. Tony, eager to know more, leaned forward. So, what's the deal with the union guys? Matty's smile faded slightly as he took a drag from his cigar. They want a more even split on this deal, but I say to hell with them. I'm gonna nip this thing in the bud today. He said. I gotta make sure they don't go running off to the Gambinos either. I don't need them sticking their nose into our business. Frankie cracked his knuckles. We got your back. Matty grinned again, his easy demeanor returning. Good. That's what I like to hear. The drive continued with more jokes and stories from Matty about his years in the business. He spoke about the ups and downs of being in the life, but it was clear that construction had always been his bread and butter. By the time they arrived at the meeting spot in Long Island, the mood had shifted slightly. They were all on alert now, knowing that anything could happen. Matty looked at Jack and the boys before stepping out of the car. All right, stay sharp. Let's get this done. The meeting was supposed to be low-key, just a few guys from the union sorting out profit splits and finalizing deals. Jack parked the car, and they all stepped out, the cold night air biting at their skin. Remember, Matty said, flicking his cigarette to the ground and grinding it under his boot, keep it cool. We're here to make sure everything goes smoothly. No unnecessary trouble. Jack nodded, and the three friends followed Matty into the warehouse. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, with the faint hum of machinery echoing in the background. A few men from the union were already there, standing around a large table, discussing the bid. Matty walked over to them, greeting them with firm handshakes and a few words of reassurance. Jack, Frankie, and Tony stood off to the side, keeping their distance but staying close enough to act if anything went wrong. For the first half hour, everything seemed to be going as planned. Matty was in control of the conversation, and the union men seemed receptive to the family's offer. Jack could almost feel the tension start to creep in when the door to the warehouse opened, and 4 men stepped inside. Jack didn't need to be told who they were. He could feel it in the way the air shifted, and the way Matty's body stiffened. These guys weren't part of the union, they were mob guys. One of them, a tall, heavy-set man with no hair and a cocky grin, walked right up to the table, his eyes flicking from Matty to the union men. What's going on here? He asked, his voice smooth but dripping with arrogance. Matty's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. This ain't got nothing to do with you, Butch. Get out of here. The big man smirked, leaning casually against the table. Not talking union business without us, are you? He chuckled loudly. Thought we'd drop by, see if there's anything we could do to help. Butch then looked around the room, drawing his attention to the real reason for his arrival. Look who it is, he continued. Joey, these are the guys I was telling you about on the ride over here. Nicky's old friends. Wait, what did he say? Jack's heart began to race. He knew what this was now. An attempt to rattle them, to stir up trouble. They were fishing, trying to stir the pot about Nicky. Matty rose from his seat, his hands clenched into fists. I said get out of here. All of you. This ain't your damn business. Yeah, move your ass. Frankie sent out his remark. He was equally as big as Butch, who looked him up and down several times. And who the hell are you? One of Vinny's boys? You got something to say to me? Jack could feel the tension mounting. Frankie wasn't the type to back down, and Jack could see that his friend was close to snapping. You heard Matty. Tony said, stepping between Frankie and the enforcer. This isn't your bid. Leave. Butch's eyes darkened, and for a moment, he thought things were about to explode in here. But before it could escalate, Matty stepped closer. You need to get out of here, he ordered. You don't want this to get ugly. There was a tense pause before the big brute finally shrugged, his cocky grin returning. We'll leave. But don't think for a second that we're not watching you boys. We know what you did. With that, Butch and his crew turned and walked out of the warehouse, leaving a thick cloud of tension in their wake. Jack's heart was still pounding, but he forced himself to stay calm. That was close, too close. Matty turned to the 3 friends, his eyes narrowing. What the hell was that? I told you to keep it cool. They were pushing, Frankie snapped, still glaring at the door where Butch had disappeared. What were we supposed to do? Just let them walk all over us? We're here to win this bid. You boys need to learn how to control yourselves. Jack knew Matty was right, but it was hard to swallow. The rest of the meeting went smoothly. The union bid was secured, and they walked away with control over the $25 million Brooklyn housing project. It was a win, but the encounter with Butch still lingered in the back of their minds. This situation with Nicky was far from over. It was another late night in Brooklyn, and Rocco's bar was semi-packed with the usual crowd of drunk locals and low-level guys looking for a place to unwind. The noise of laughter, clinking glasses, and music filled the air, but Jack, Frankie, and Tony barely noticed it. Their minds were elsewhere as they made their way straight to the back of the bar, pushing past the chaos and heading toward Vinny's private table. When they reached him, they noticed immediately that he looked more stressed than they had ever seen him before. His usually confident demeanor was replaced with something more anxious, more uncertain. He sat with a drink in front of him, swirling the glass but not really drinking it. The moment they sat down, he spoke, his voice low and strained. "There's still no sign of Donnie or Ralph," he said, shaking his head. "And the report from Manhattan, it doesn't look good. You think the Genovese people got to them?" Tony inquired. "We don't know yet." "So, what do you mean not good?" Jack chimed in, trying to keep his voice calm, though the tension was already creeping in. Vinny leaned forward, his hands running through his hair. "Nobody's heard a damn thing. No sign of them at all. We had a few guys checking around, asking questions, but there's nothing. It's like they just vanished." The air between them grew heavy with dread. Donnie and Ralph had been missing too long, and they all knew what that usually meant. Jack cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "We just came back from the meeting with Matty Flowers," he said, trying to get his head back into the present. "The meeting went well. He secured the housing project in Gowanus, but the Gambinos showed up." Vinny's eyes snapped up, instantly alert. "The Gambinos? Who?" "Butch," Jack said. "One of Sal's guys. He wasn't there to talk about the project, he was there to sniff around. Asking questions, hinting about Nicky." Frankie, who had been quiet up to this point, slammed his fist on the table, the frustration boiling over. "I should have knocked that asshole out when I had the chance. But I didn't know if he was made or not." Vinny raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth despite the tension. "Butch? A made guy? Nah, Frankie, you could have taken him down and nobody would have blinked. He's a knock-around guy, nothing more." Frankie's face flushed with frustration. "Damn it." I hesitated, and now he's probably running his mouth about us. Vinny chuckled softly, but there was little humor in it. "Relax. Butch ain't a problem on his own. It's the bigger picture you gotta worry about." Jack leaned forward, his voice more urgent now. "That's the thing, Vinny." He was poking around. "It's like they're trying to put something together about Nicky's death. And with Donnie and Ralph missing, what if they got taken? What if they're being tortured for information?" The table went quiet. Frankie and Tony's eyes widened at Jack's suggestion, the paranoia thick in the air. Jack could see the concern flash across Vinny's face, but his cousin quickly covered it up. "Look," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Don't go jumping to conclusions. We don't know what happened to those guys, and we sure as hell don't know if the Gambinos are that close to putting the pieces together. It's all just speculation right now." "But what if they are?" he asked frantically. "What if they know?" Vinny exhaled, clearly sensing the growing panic among his underlings. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. "Listen, I get it. I do. But you can't start thinking like that. You'll drive yourself crazy. You're with me now, remember? I told you I'd look out for you, didn't I? What more do you want from me?" Jack nodded, though the knot in his stomach wasn't going anywhere. "What should we do now?" Vinny smiled faintly, trying to ease the tension. "You go home. You did good today, all of you. Matty's happy, the job went smooth. That's what matters right now." There was a moment of silence as the three friends processed Vinny's words. Jack wanted to push further, to keep talking about Donnie, about the Gambinos, but he could see it in Vinny's face. This was all he was going to get for now. Vinny drained the rest of his drink and stood up. "You'll know when I know. For now, get some rest." Frankie, Tony, and Jack stood as well, exchanging a few uneasy glances before heading out of the back room. As they walked through the crowded bar, the noise and laughter around them felt strangely distant. None of them spoke as they made their way to the exit, the weight of the night hanging heavy on their shoulders. Outside, the cool Brooklyn air hit them, but it did little to clear their heads. They stood there for a moment, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Frankie finally broke the silence. "You think Vinny's right? That we're just overthinking it?" Jack shrugged, lighting a cigarette and taking a slow drag. "Maybe. Maybe not. But until we know more, we stick together and keep our heads down." Tony nodded in agreement, though his eyes were still filled with worry. "This thing's far from over. I can feel it." Jack didn't respond. He just took another drag from his cigarette, watching the smoke curl up into the night sky, wondering how much longer they could keep the truth hidden. After leaving the bar, the three of them walked back to their childhood street in silence. The streets felt different now, darker, more dangerous. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every shadow held a threat they couldn't see. Finally, Frankie broke the silence again, his voice tense with frustration. "We can't keep living like this. Always looking over our shoulders, waiting for them to make a move. We need to do something first." Jack shook his head, trying to stay calm. "Like what?" "Butch Ramon. Get out of here with that shit. We ain't touching him. We ain't hitting nobody over there. Yeah, besides Sal already has a hard-on for us. You think taking out one of his henchmen will help smooth the situation?" Tony added to the conversation. "It'll let them know not to mess with our crew. And Vinny's got our back, hasn't he?" Frankie snapped. "We can't just sit around and wait to get whacked. I know that much. Maybe we should just disappear. Leave the neighborhood, get out of town for a while." Tony considered. "You think we can just leave? We're practically on record with Vinny now. There's no walking away." Tony ran a hand through his hair, his frustration boiling over. "So what then? We just keep hiding until they figure out we did Nicky?" Jack didn't have an answer. The truth was, he didn't know what the best course of action was. They were trapped, caught between the suspicion of the Gambinos and the uncertainty of Donald Ricciardi's disappearance. "We keep low," Jack finally said, though the words felt hollow. "That's all we can do right now." Frankie cursed under his breath, but didn't argue. Tony just nodded, his eyes filled with fear. It was clear what the two of them were planning to do. Frankie was only putting on a brave face, hinting at killing Butch. He was just as fearful as the other two. Without another word, the three of them went their separate ways, each of them haunted by the same fear, the fear that they were running out of time, and that sooner or later, the truth about Nicky's death would come back to destroy them all.